What's up, everybody? It's Tyrell Belanger of the One at the Line podcast. Today, we have a pretty exciting episode. We're going to start out talking about all the Game 2s and some of the Game 3s that went down over the past couple of days. And then we're going to get into my full first round mock draft after the lottery came out, and I'll give my thoughts on the lottery at that time as well. But let's start out with these playoffs. So, first series I'll talk about, the Raptors. They're up 3-0 against the Nets. Just from what I'm seeing, the Raptors are simply too good of a team. The Nets they don't belong there. Caris LeVert has been shooting bad. He's been trying to facilitate a little bit more, but TLC has had a good series. Jared Allen has played all right, but they just don't belong on the same court as Toronto. They're just killing them defensively, offensively. They're just a better team all in all. Then we move on to my Celtics, who are also up 3-0 on the Philadelphia 76ers. Last night, it was a pretty good game, but Game 2, it was a complete blowout. Joel Embiid has been playing good, but Philly doesn't need him to be good. They need him to drop a consistent 35 and 15 a night. And even though they are killing the Celtics on the offensive glass, the Celtics are just hitting their shots. Even though Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown shot terrible in Game 3, Kemba Walker just down the stretch, we went on a 10-0 run, and he was just a big part of that. Our bench has been stepping up great with the loss of Gordon Hayward. And even in Game 2, we were down big in the first quarter, and Jason Tatum and the bench of Grant Williams, Robert Williams, Enes Kanter, Romeo Langford, Wanamaker, they all brought us back into that game. And then in Game 3, it was back and forth. It was a game of runs, and then the Celtics just got the last run. So now they're down 3-0, and it's looking bleak. Maybe they can pull out a game or two, but Celtics are going to win this series and move on to the Eastern Conference semifinals to move against the Raptors, which will be a great series. Then we move on to the Utah Jazz, who are up 2-1 against Denver. After Denver and Utah had that great back and forth in Game 1, and Denver pulled it out, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, that's two back-to-back blowouts of Denver, and they have been better defensively and better offensively both games by a wide margin. Jokic hasn't been able to guard anything. He's too slow, and Donovan Mitchell and Rudy have been killing him in the pick and roll, and that's one of the adjustments they made from Game 1 to Game 2, is they just ran a lot more pick and roll, not as much isolation with Donovan Mitchell. He's becoming more of a facilitator as well as a scorer, and they're just putting Jokic in the pick and roll, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. So, I don't know. Utah is looking really good even without Bogdanovich, which I think I underestimated them. They are playing really good basketball, even though they lost their 20-point score, and that is just a sight to see. They are still a talented-ass team, and they're showing it. Then we move on to the Clippers, who are up 2-1 against the Dallas Mavericks. That first game, Mavericks kind of got screwed with Porzingis getting ejected. Second game, the Mavericks bounced back and outplayed the Clippers with Paul George shooting terribly. Then last night, Paul George still shot terrible, but Kawhi Leonard put the team on his back, and they still blew out the Mavericks. So, if you're not noticing a pattern, it's been a lot of blowouts lately, and it's it's good basketball because it's the playoffs, but no one likes to watch a team that's up 30 keep just scoring. Some people might enjoy that. I don't know, it just gets boring after a while seeing all these great teams matched up with teams that just aren't playing as well as them, clearly, as Dallas has been. They've been very streaky. That first game they played great with Porzingis on the court. Second game they played even better, and now they got outplayed by the Clippers. and Paul George was still shooting terribly, just like he did in Game 2. But this time, Kawhi and Trez and Lou Williams just stepped up more. Now we have Miami, who's up 2-0 against the Indiana Pacers. And they are playing lockdown defense. And the Pacers, Victor Oladipo isn't having a good series. TJ Warren is getting locked up by Jimmy Butler. Miles Turner is a non-factor, really. I can see Miami easily sweeping this series at this point. The Indiana Pacers, without Sabonis against this Miami team, are just simply outclassed. And the only chance they had of winning this series was if Victor Oladipo came out and played like he did in 2018, and he has not played anywhere near that level. He's been shooting terribly. His shot selection is terrible. His defense is mediocre. And then you just have Miles Turner down low trying to grab rebounds, and that's not his game. And it's just not working for them. And Bam is playing great. Jimmy Butler. Goran Dragic has had a few moments. Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. They've all just been incredible for Miami, and they're just too deep of a team for Indiana. Then we get Milwaukee, who just tied the series against Orlando Magic. And they really shouldn't have lost that first game, and they showed it. They blew out the Magic this time, and I don't see them losing another game. I'm really not sure how they lost that first game. They were just really nonchalant. Chris Middleton had like a decent game this time, but he was still pretty bad. But Giannis and the rest of the team kind of just stepped up, and Orlando is just outmatched. Then we have the Los Angeles Lakers, who also tied up the series 1-1 against Portland. And Anthony Davis finally had a good game. So I got to give him a round of applause here. He finally had a game where he showed he is a top 5 player in the NBA. And we haven't seen that from him all bubble. Except maybe those first couple games where he dropped, I believe, 30 on the Mavericks. But other than that, he's been shooting terribly all throughout the bubble. And then he came out and the Lakers won. LeBron James had a 10-point game, and they still won because Anthony Davis was out there and he was playing great defense and playing great offense. And that's what he has to do for the rest of the series, or else Portland will run away with this series. If Anthony Davis isn't on his A game, if he lets Jusuf Nurkic clamp him up, especially with Zach Collins going out for the season, I don't know how the Lakers win that series. Now, we move on to Houston and OKC. This has been very disappointing. I severely overestimated OKC, and I will take that L. But at the same time, they just aren't playing good. This isn't OKC basketball we saw in the regular season. James Harden by himself has been killing them. He is their only option offensively without Westbrook. And that's the only man they have to guard, and they just can't seem to stop him. You would think that a team with as much length, as much depth defensively as OKC, you could switch on Chris Paul. Hamidou Diallo is athletic and lengthy. Lou Dort is great on defense. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a lengthy, smart defender. And James Harden is just cooking. And I don't know if it's right now, after 2 blowouts, it's looking like a sweep. I'm not going to lie. It is looking like a sweep for them. So, I hope OKC bounces back. And, but I hope they bounce back and make this interesting, because if they don't, and this is a sweep, this will be the most disappointing matchup in the entire playoffs. So, now that we're done with that, we're going to move on to the main topic, the NBA draft and my mock draft for the first round. So the lottery happened on Thursday, and we had a few surprises. Charlotte and Chicago jumped up to 3-4. Cavs moved down a couple spots. Atlanta fell. Detroit fell to 7, which is probably the most devastating loss. And then New York fell to 8, which I'm not too worried about because you could still find what they really need at 8 in this draft. Because it's not real. This draft isn't filled with a lot of superstars. It's filled with a lot of potential superstars and a lot of role players. So, unless you're picking in the top 3, after that, it's going to be a lot of role players and some players with a lot of potential, who I'm going to get to. But this draft is a very, I wouldn't say weak, but I would say a very all-around draft class. I can see a lot of these players being on the same level in a couple years. I can see a lot of them being very good role players on good teams, some bench pieces, and I could see them all being pretty good. So, we're going to start out with the first overall pick. The Minnesota Timberwolves select Anthony Edwards out of Georgia. I think this is an easy pick. A lot of people are saying maybe get LaMelo and switch D'Lo to the 2. I don't think that will work just because the defense, you have D'Lo, LaMelo, and Cat that all can't play defense. Cat's a good rim protector, but he's not a good defender. Just because you can get blocks doesn't mean you're a good defender. D'Lo he's big at 6'5", so he's all right, but he can't stay in front of anyone. And LaMelo, we all know LaMelo can't play defense, and that's one of his biggest weaknesses. So I think Anthony Edwards would be a great fit for Minnesota. He's athletic. He has the potential to be a great defender with his length and his size and his frame. He's shown he's a good shooter. The only problems with Anthony Edwards is maybe his shot selection, but I think being around D'Lo and Cat where he has to share the ball a little bit more, and it's not only him at Georgia, just isolating all the time, I think it will be a great fit for him, and I think he'll have a lot of opportunity in Minnesota. Now, for the second overall pick, I have the Golden State Warriors picking James Wiseman, also out of Georgia. Not out of Georgia, out of Memphis, my fault. But Wiseman, okay, first of all, I think the Warriors are going to trade this pick. I think they are either going to move down, or they're either going to take this pick, maybe move down, or perhaps trade it for a superstar to pair along Curry and Clay, which I think they're probably going to do, or they're going to try. I saw a trade package the other day. It was the second overall pick and Andrew Wiggins for Rudy Gobert and Jordan Clarkson. I think that would be a good trade for the Warriors. And then as for Utah, they just get younger and they'd still be a playoff team, I think, with Wiggins, Donovan Mitchell, whoever they select at 2. I think they would be all right. And then the Warriors are getting a rim protector and a bench scorer, so I think that might be a good trade for both sides. I don't know if that trade will go down, but I definitely think they will trade it. But if they don't, I have them picking James Wiseman. He's a great rim protector, very athletic. He only played 3 games because of that whole problem with his coach and buying him a house or whatever. But the thing with Wiseman is he is a great center, and I think he will be good coming out in his first couple years. But the problem with him is he doesn't have a jump shot. Maybe with the Warriors and all their shooting, maybe they'll try to develop him into like a somewhat good shooter that can at least knock down some corner threes every now and then. But his jump shot isn't good. He hasn't shown flashes of being a good shooter. And in the NBA, it's moving towards a era where all bigs are going to be able to shoot at one point in the NBA, and all these rim protecting athletic pick-and-roll centers are becoming a lot less valuable. We saw what Clint Capella got traded for. It was basically Robert Covington. Andre Drummond got traded for a bag of chips. Rudy Gobert, we don't even know what he's going to get on the market if Utah decides to trade him. I don't think it's going to be that much. But those centers are just becoming a lot less valuable in the NBA because you could find a Clint Capella for a much cheaper option. You can get what Clint Capella brings for much cheaper than Clint Capella, of course. But other than that, I think James Wiseman is going to be a good center, and he has all-star potential. It's just a little bit iffy for me. Then we have Charlotte at number 3 with LaMelo Ball out of Australia. LaMelo is great all around. He is questionable on defense, if we're being polite, but he's 6'6". He's very lengthy, so he has potential if he can get his speed up and just have a better IQ defensively. So I think he could maybe perhaps become a decent defender here. But he's a great playmaker. He can shoot. He can do pretty much everything. The only problem I have with LaMelo, he needs to score more. And I think in Charlotte, this is going to be a perfect situation for him. They're probably going to move Terry Rozier to the bench. It will be LaMelo and Devontae Graham. It'll be bad defensively, but they're not doing anything next year anyways. So why not just try something out? See if this backcourt is going to work. And if it doesn't, maybe you trade one of them. Maybe you trade Devontae or Terry, or you try to make some moves. I can also see them maybe trading down if they really like a Kungwu or Obi Toppin. I think they will probably stay here and pick LaMelo. But don't be surprised if you see them move down a little bit. Now, pick 4. This is probably the pick I'm most sure about. I think they are going to definitely pick Deni Avdija out of Makara Telesiv. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, but Deni, he has a lot of potential, and I'm really high on Deni. I think he could be the Luka Doncic out of this draft. I know that's a lot of high praise, but I can see he can shoot, he can play make. He has good length, he has a good frame. He's just a little bit skinny, but you can work around that in the Bulls system. What do the Bulls need? They need a small forward to pair along Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Lowry, and Wendell. And he could develop behind Otto Porter, or he could start Deni. I think they'll probably roll with Otto Porter for this season. And then when Otto Porter walks next year, maybe Deni slides in that small forward spot, and he'll get a lot of... I think Otto Porter could be a great mentor for him, and maybe train him up to be a better defender than what he is. And then, if that happens, Deni could be great. Now, number 5, I have Onyeka Okongwu out of USC. He is the second best big man of this draft, period. I could see him, if I see Golden State or maybe a team trading up to Golden State, I can see them easily taking Okongwu over Wiseman, just because Wiseman only played 3 games. Okongwu, through the season, just showed he has a great frame. He's a little bit undersized for center, but he makes up for that being a great rebounder, just very tenacious. He reminds me of a Bam Adebayo without the level of playmaking that Bam brings. He's very strong, very athletic. I can see Okongwu being a really good player in this league, and I think since the Cavs, of course, Kevin Love and Andre Drummond aren't really part of their plans moving on, Okongwu could be one of their replacements. Now we move on to Atlanta, which is my first surprise of the draft to some people. I have them taking Isaac Okoro out of Auburn. He is my Auburn boy, as I might have said before. I am an Auburn basketball fan. He's probably the best perimeter defender in the draft. And what the Hawks need is they need to keep stacking up on these 3-and-D wings That way, if one of them doesn't work out, you just move one of them up. Like Cam Reddish, even though he had a strong finish, he started out slow. Maybe Okoro takes his spot. Cam Reddish can move back into the backup too. Maybe he starts, and then in the future, maybe DeAndre Hunter is that starting shooting guard. Maybe Isaac Okoro is that starting small forward. You just need to surround Trey with as much defense as possible for him to be successful. Okoro can shoot. He has the defense, so he's probably one of the better 3-and-D wings in this draft. And I think he will fit great next to Trae Young and John Collins. Now, we have Detroit, who took a great hit in this draft lottery. They were really hoping for a top 3 pick to try to get LaMelo Ball, and they fall all the way to 7. So now I have them taking Killian Hayes out of NLM. It was a toss-up between Killian Hayes and Cole Anthony for me here. But I think Detroit is going to take a risk here. I think they have to. They don't have any talent on that team besides Christian Wood, and that is their only promising piece on that team. Luke Kennard he's a great shooter and he can score, but no defense, and he can't do anything else. He can't play make, can't do any of that. So I think they need to take a risk with Killian Hayes, who I think has the most superstar potential out of any guard in this draft class behind LaMelo Ball. So I think this is more of a risky pick, but Detroit needs to take risks to try to get their franchise back on track, try to get them some pieces, and I could see Killian Hayes coming out here and being very successful for Detroit. Now if we move on to New York, who are going to take the other point guard, Cole Anthony out of UNC. I am very high on Cole Anthony. A lot of people are having him drop in their mock drafts. I think Cole Anthony has all the tools to be good in this league. Very athletic. He can shoot. He's small at 6'2", but he really gets in the passing lanes and he dogs on people defensively, and he can hold his own out there. And I think he's going to be the Knicks need a point guard. Although they have DSJ and Ntilikina, they're just not at that level, and I don't know if they ever will be. So Cole Anthony could come in, and I can easily see him being Rookie of the Year this season. He just has a lot of opportunity here in New York, and that's why I think it's a great fit for him. Now, if you haven't been following me, you're probably asking yourself, where's this one person? And I have him here. Obi Toppin out of Dayton, going to Washington at 9. Yes, he has fallen a lot in my draft. I have a good reason for this. I like Obi Toppin's game, but the problem with Obi Toppin is he is one of the players in this draft that I can clearly see and say that I don't think he is going to be a star in this league. I think he is going to be a good role player. His defense is questionable. He's a great offensive player, but the problem with him, he needs a great playmaker to be successful. That's why I have him going to Washington, because that's just a good fit for him. They have John Wall, who before he got injured was one of the best playmakers in the league, averaging about 25 and 10, which is incredible. So I think in this system, maybe you roll out a lineup next year of John Wall, Bradley Beal if he's still there, Obi Toppin, Rui Hachimura, and Thomas Bryant. I think that would be a good lineup. They'd have a good offense, good defense. So I think Obi would fit in that system pretty well. And yeah, so I have Obi Toppin falling to 9. Then at 10 for Phoenix, I have them taking Tyrese Halliburton out of Iowa State. He's very efficient, he's great on defense, and he is a great complementary piece to Devin Booker. So I think instead of taking a more ball-dominant guy here for their guard position to back up Ricky Rubio and be their future point guard piece, I have them taking more of a complementary player. And he's going to knock down shots, he's going to play defense, he'll be great next to Devin Booker, I think, and will be a good fit. At 11, we have the Spurs, who they're not used to this lottery. They have them taking Patrick Williams, big man out of Florida State. He has the potential to be a good shooter, and he is a very strong defender. So, what the Spurs need to do, I think they should try to move on from LaMarcus Aldridge, whether that's trade him to, say, Portland. I think someone will give you a decent offer for LaMarcus Aldridge because he still has value, and then maybe try to get DeMar DeRozan to decline his player option and just move on. And then you have Patrick Williams, who could come in and be that LaMarcus Aldridge replacement. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as LaMarcus Aldridge, but he can come in and do all right in that, especially with Greg Popovich there, if he stays. And I think he'll be great in that Spurs system, no matter who is coaching or who's there. Now, we have Sacramento at 12. I have them taking Alexei Pokusevsky out of the Olympiacos, I believe. Yep. He is a 7-foot demigod. That is the best way I can describe him. He is that guy in 2K that pulls up to the park and is a 7-3 playmaker. He reminds me a lot of Porzingis. He's fast, he can shoot, he can play make, he has a handle, just incredible. The only problem with him, he is very skinny, so I think he might struggle defensively against a lot of these big men. But other than that, he is a very all-around player on the offensive side of the ball, and I think he could come into the Sacramento team and give them a much-needed boost. And hopefully they fire Luke Walton this offseason, and they can slide Pokusevsky into that lineup. Maybe play him alongside Marvin Bagley, or maybe have him come off the bench for a couple seasons. But just let him develop. I think he is more of a project player. In Sacramento, they are a decent enough team to compete for an 8 seed, as long as Luke Walton is not the coach, which I've explained why he shouldn't be the coach before. But I think Pokusevsky could come into this King system, develop a couple years, and be good. Now, another man that I have falling in my draft class, Devin Vassell, out of Florida State. He is a good trade. He is a good 3-and-D option, but I think that's it. I don't think he has potential to be anything else, really, for being honest. But I have him going to New Orleans here just because that small forward spot is the most iffy spot, really. In the depth chart, they don't really have a backup small forward, and I think they need to get something different to back up Brandon Ingram. And since Brandon Ingram isn't a great defender, I have them taking Devin Vassell, who is a good defender. So now you have Vassell backing him up, and if Jrue Holiday gets moved, maybe you move Ingram to the 2 and Vassell at the 3, and you run a big lineup out there. Or you move Zion to the 5 and Vassell comes in at the 4. You can do a lot of options. If Vassell comes out and shows he is a great player, or I could see New Orleans maybe trying to trade the pick if they don't see anyone they like here. But I have them picking Devin Vassell. Now I have my Celtics taking Tyrese Maxey out of Kentucky. Sorry, excuse me. My Boston Celtics need 2 things. They need someone that can come off the bench and perhaps replace somewhat Marcus Smart, or someone that can come in and score, or they need a center that can be that consistent center. Enes Kanter isn't consistent. Robert Williams has shown flashes, but he isn't consistent. Daniel Tice, same thing, shown flashes, but he isn't very consistent. We need a player that's going to come in and be a consistent center for us. So here I have them taking Tyrese Maxey to fit the first option. He's a great pesky defender, gets in passing lanes, he has great hands. The only problem with him is his offense is a little bit questionable, but I think that could be hidden in the Celtic system. Maybe he is in the G League for maybe this first year, just trying to get him to develop, just like Romeo Langford did this season, who didn't really play much. Then he came in, and he's shown that he has value in the rotation. I can see the same thing happening for Tyrese Maxey. Now, we have Orlando at 15 taking Kira Lewis. Chuma Okeke, who they took last year, was a reach. I believe they were at 16 last year. But here I have them taking Kira Lewis out of Alabama. He's not a great passer or defender, but he is the fastest point guard in the draft, period. He is a great shooter, and that's what Orlando needs. They need offense. They don't really need defense. They have Isaac. They have Aaron Gordon if he stays. I think they need some sort of offense at that guard position. Markelle is a good defender, but his offense game still isn't really there. So I have them taking Kira Lewis. Hopefully they can move on from DJ Augustine. Kira Lewis can sign that backup point guard behind Markelle. And I think he could be very successful in Orlando. Now we have Portland at 16 taking Saddiq Bey out of Villanova. He is one of the best shooters in the draft, and that's really what Portland needs. They need someone that can come in, shoot the ball next to CJ and Dame, or even come off the bench. So I think Saddiq Bey will fit in pretty nicely with Portland. I'm going to start speeding it up here because after the lottery it gets a little bit less interesting. Now we move on to 17 with Minnesota taking Josh Green out of Arizona. So now I have Minnesota doing much of what I think Atlanta should do. Stack up on them 3-and-D wings. They have Okogie, they have Culver, they picked Anthony Edwards in my mock draft. Now they get Josh Green. He can play the shooting guard or he can play the small forward. He's a great athlete. He can shoot it all right. He has some really good defense, and I think he would fit nicely in that. Any defender is going to fit nice with D'Lo and Cat because they need defense in that lineup because they can't play defense. They need as much defense on that team to cover for their lack of defense. So, see him taking Josh Green to be that 3-and-D piece. At 18, I have Dallas selecting R.J. Hampton, who was in the NBL along with LaMelo Ball. He has a great frame, and he's a pretty good shooter. So I think any shooter has got to fit next to Luka Doncic. I don't know if R.J. Hampton is going to get rotational minutes because I predict that the Mavericks are going to be very good next year. So I don't know if he'll be in the rotation much. But maybe he's in the G League. Maybe he gets his limited minutes every now and then. But since J.J. Barea is probably going to retire, they have Trey Burke, which I don't know if they're going to bring him back, even though he's been great in these playoffs. I could see R.J. Hampton maybe sliding in that backup point guard. He's pretty safe pick here for Dallas, which they just need shooting, and R.J. Hampton is a shooter. Now, Brooklyn taking Aaron Naismith out of Vanderbilt. Once again, he is probably one of the best shooters in the draft. Brooklyn, he's probably not going to play for Brooklyn this season just because KD and Kyrie are coming back, and he's going to be that shooter off the bench for any team that's just that sharpshooter that they need. I can see him easily being like a Troy Daniels or maybe a JJ Redick. He plays good team defense just like JJ Redick, so that's probably my comparison for him, except he's just a little bit bigger. So I can see him coming into Brooklyn and being a decent shooting piece next to KD and Kyrie. Then I have Milwaukee at 20 selecting Desmond Bane out of TCU. He's a senior, and that they need veterans on this team, so I think he's one of the more NBA ready people. He's a 3-and-D wing once again, and once again, any shooter fits next to Giannis, and they need as much defense and shooting as they can get, so Milwaukee could put him in that pipeline. Dante DiVincenzo showed that first year he had his flashes, and then he came in this year and is the sixth man on a team competing for a championship. I can see Desmond Bane having a similar jump to him. Now, we move on to 21 with Philadelphia taking Tyrell Terry out of Stanford. He's one of my favorite prospects in this draft, not because we have the same name, but just I like watching him play. He's a terrific shooter, and I think he'll fit great in Philadelphia because they need as much shooting as they can get if they don't plan on trading Embiid or Simmons. So Tyrell Terry could come in, be a good shooter off the bench, and hopefully he can be somewhat consistent for them. Now we have Denver at 22, taking Paul Reed out of DePaul. He is one of those risky prospects, but as you can see, all these risky prospects that Denver takes a chance on, they work out most of the time. Bol, Michael Porter Jr., just to name a few. He's a great all-around player. He's just kind of risky to pick here just because he's shown flashes of being great, but he's also shown flashes of not being that good. But if he works out, that's just another big man that they just came out and found in the late first round. Now we have Utah at 23, taking Theo Maledon out of Asvel. This is just a safe pick for Utah. Another point guard that they can have if Mike Conley decides or just keeps regressing. He has very good size, and I think he could be decent in this league, maybe, if he gets his offensive game down. He's pretty athletic. He can shoot it a little bit, so maybe he comes into the Utah system and is all right. Then we have Milwaukee at 24, taking Malachi Flynn out of San Diego State. He's a great defender. He has size. He's athletic. He's a good shooter. So he's just another one of those point guards that can come in and shoot the ball and play some defense for Milwaukee. Now we have OKC at 25, taking Precious Achiuwa out of Memphis. A lot of people are very high on Precious Achiuwa. I think he's a very risky prospect. I think he could come into this league and be an all-star. I think he could also come into this league and not be that good. He reminds me of Sekou Doumbia, who the Pistons picked last year. And he has shown flashes of being great. But at the same time, he's just not that good. I don't think he's going to come into the league as that. He's a project player. I wouldn't expect him to do great right off the rip. So don't count him off. But I could just see him coming into the league and not being that good. But maybe in a couple years he develops into something. And OKC they have so many picks, they can afford to take some risks. Now we have Boston at 26, taking a big man, Xavier Tillman, out of Michigan State. He has a very high IQ, which our centers don't. Robert Williams, he's very block happy, so he gets in foul trouble a lot, and his canter can't play defense. Daniel Tice, he has a decent IQ. He's all right. But here we have one of the more dependable players in the draft, one of the more developed players. He has very high IQ for the game, like I said, and he can come in and maybe get some rotational minutes and be consistent for us. Now we have New York at 27, taking Leandro Bolmaro out of Barcelona. He is a 6'7" ball handler, but a terrible shooter. So he could come in and perhaps be something. So this is another guard pick for New York. And they can be a little bit risky here in the late first round, which I think that's what teams need to be in the late first round and second round. Just grab some risky prospects that could turn into something down the road. And that's what I think Leandro could do. He could either be a 6'7" playmaker that is just great, or he can be a 6'7" playmaker that can't do anything else. Now we have the Los Angeles Lakers at 28, taking Grant Riller out of Charleston. This is a good pick for them just because he can create his own shot. He's a great ball handler, and that's what the Lakers need off the bench. They need someone that can handle the ball because they don't really have anyone. Caruso can't really handle. KCP, no. Dion Waiters, not really. J.R. Smith, not really. So maybe he could come in, get some rotational minutes, just being a ball handler off the bench, which they desperately need at this point. So I have Grant Riller going at 28 to the Lakers. At 29, the Toronto Raptors are going to select Devin Dotson, point guard out of Kansas. He's a good defender, and he has some potential becoming a good shooter. I think the Raptors, they've been great drafting, finding some pieces that will eventually turn into something. OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Chris Boucher. So I think he could come into that system, be all right. And then maybe next year he takes one of those jumps that a Chris Boucher did, or an OG did, or a Pascal did, which is a dramatic jump. But you never know what can happen in this league. And if they move on from Kyle Lowry, or if Van Fleet gets the bag and they don't want to pay him, I just dropped something. But if Van Fleet gets the bag and they don't want to match it, or if Kyle Lowry, they decide to move on from him, he could come in and easily be a risky prospect, but he could be something maybe. Then at 30, we have the Boston Celtics with the last pick in the first round, taking Tre Jones out of Duke. He surprised everyone by not declaring last year and staying another year at Duke. He probably would have been selected in the late first round last year, so now that he's declared, he's late first round this year. He is a very low-maintenance point guard. He's very mature, and he could be a great bench playmaker for Boston, which they desperately need off the bench. They don't really have any playmaking off the bench. So anything that could help boost our bench, since our bench is just not that good at creating shots, and when our starters aren't in, it struggles offensively most of the time. They need someone that can come in, facilitate for everyone, get everyone open, and that's what Tre Jones can do. And he's very mature, so he's not going to mess up the locker room. All right, so that was it for my first round mock draft for the 2020 NBA draft, which also is being talked about to being pushed back along with the December 1st start date, which could be bad or it could be good. Adam Silver did say he wants to have fans in arenas next year, but we don't know when this virus is going to go away or when it's going to cool down to the point where we can have fans in arenas. So we could be pushing this start date back, and we still might not have fans, and then we just wasted time. So, Adam Silver has done a great job so far managing this whole virus and this bubble, so I trust him. He's probably the best commissioner in sports, in my opinion. He's smart, listens to everyone's opinion, and him and the Players Association are going to come up with a plan, and I have faith in them. So that will be it for the 4th episode of the One at the Line podcast. I've been your host, Tyrell Belanger. Please subscribe for more episodes every Wednesday and Saturday. Like the video if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.